Greetings, Buck. Stuart Charles here, HomeStudioBasics.com, helping you make sound decisions. So, today we're going to get into the AKG K702 versus the Sennheiser HD600. Or 100 if you're white. So, first let's dive right into build. So, these headphones are very similarly built as far as weight goes. I was actually surprised to find that the K702 is an ounce heavier than the HD600. I did not. Holding them in your hand, you wouldn't think that, but yeah, they're about the same weight, but of course the K702 is a bit bulkier. Like, you look like a freaking nerd with this headphone on, to be honest, totally honest. You look like E.T. on a bicycle, and it's a little bit disappointing when you look at yourself in the mirror, like, why did I invest in this product? Like, pure disappointment. Don't walk outside with these on, or you're gonna get punched in the face probably. But the HD600 looks a little bit more low profile. It sits on your head more snugly, I guess. You don't look like a freak of nature with one on, whereas with the K702s you most certainly do. Yeah, so the build on the HD600 is a little bit different than that of the 702. The headband is different, the cups are a little bit different, the grills are a little bit different, the headband adjustment of course is a bit different, and the terminations coming out of the ear cups are different as well. The 702s have a mini XLR cable coming out of one side of the headphone, whereas the HD600s have the 2-pin connectors coming out of both sides. Now, the 650 and the 6XX did improve on this. The connectors here are just a bit small. I've employed a pretty good technique to get them out. You really, it's not rocket science, but I mean, you just hold it really tight and just pull. It may sound fairly rudimentary, but when you first unplug it, you're bound to have a little bit of a problem getting them out. Don't be shy with it, but just, you know, firmly grasp it in your hand.
Firmly grasp it in your hand. Firmly grasp it. Firmly grasp it! That ought to do it.
And pull. It's pretty simple and straightforward. The K702 is even more simple and straightforward. It's mini XLR, which is really, I really love the connection on the 702. It's super simple to plug in and out. The other difference is the hammock headband adjustment on the K702s versus the traditional adjustment on the 600s. Now, when you put a 702 on your head, you don't have to do anything. You just basically put it on and it self-adjusts to the size of your big ass melon. It has the two rods going over top, which serves as the mechanism for the headband to adjust up and down, and I'll put a B-roll up of that. Yeah, and the 600s, by contrast, they're just the traditional click adjustment. Very, very solid, durable. Like, holding a 600 in your hand, you wouldn't really think that it would be built for the long haul, but it most certainly is. I've had this headphone since 2016, and it's performed flawlessly since day one. I've never had any issues with it with anything on the headphone. Nothing. It should be noted that this headphone is indeed extremely, extremely durable and robust, even despite it being a little bit lighter in stature. Traditional click band adjustment, the K702s do not have any headband padding, whereas the HD600 has those 4 small pads. Kind of awkward looking, but kind of cool in a way as well. Different from the HD650. The HD650 had the uniform pad going across with the little crater in the middle. The look and aesthetic of these two headphones also feels very different. The padding on the K702s is circular, whereas with the 600 it's an oval shape. The grills as well, obviously. Both have velour padding, but I found that the K702s is a lot more stiff and rigid than that of the 600s. The 600s feels more like a bear as far as that's concerned. It's very soft and plush. Does wear out over time. Probably going to be the only thing that you really have to worry about with this headphone is you will have to replace the pads. Now, the pads do run fairly expensive, but I think it's worth it. If you think about it in terms of you're only going to be paying for a set of pads rather than replacing the headphone like you would with perhaps something in the hi-fi man category. Or the ear cup padding on the 600 is very soft, whereas with the 702s, I mean, it doesn't render them uncomfortable, but you're gonna notice that it's more rigid. I talked to Solid Lad. He said that the padding on the K70 or the K712s is actually more soft and plush, similar to the 600s and like a Bayer. So that was interesting to me. Yeah, both are open back, so both will leak sound. But aside from that, let's get into comfort. So we alluded to it a little bit a second ago, but when you put a K702 on your head, it is very comfortable. Clamp force is very good. The clamp force is not as tight as the HD600 fresh out the box. The clamp force is good, whereas the 600's clamp force is very tight straight away, but does open up over time. You can use various things to stretch it out. I personally did not do that. I just let it self-stretch over time. I didn't find it as big of a deal as some other people have, but I kind of enjoy the tighter fit of the 600s, to be honest. With the 702s, while the clamp force is good, that you will notice that they'll move around a little bit more on your head to the point where you're sort of almost constantly trying to find a good fit, meaning sometimes they'll slide forward, sometimes they'll slide back a little bit. So I'm always kind of adjusting and moving them around to get a good or a better fit. Wondering to myself whether or not I have the best one possible. So the other thing about the K702s is that they're a little bit less comfortable over extended listening sessions than the 600s. You'll notice that because the 702s don't have any headband padding, the strap or the piece of pleather will start to dig into the top of your head after a while. It's not a huge deal, but it is something to keep in mind because it does render them a bit more uncomfortable in the fact that you will be making more adjustments than you would with a 600. Now the 600s are head and shoulders more comfortable than anything I've ever worn, and I've demoed around 100 headphones at the time of this review, but absolutely perfect levels of comfort to the point where you will have them on, no music will be playing, like say for whatever reason the music stops and you won't even notice them on your head. I've had this happen to me on countless different occasions where I'll just be wearing the headphone and forget that music is not playing and forget that they're even on my head. So if that gives you any idea of how comfortable these are, extremely, extremely comfortable over long listening sessions, even to the point where you're not going to be making hardly any adjustments. Maybe a little bit, but whereas I'd probably give the K702s an 88 to 90 out of 100, I definitely would give HD600s about 98 to 100. Perfect score almost. Whereas the 702s will dig into your head, the top of your head, the 600s don't. It's one of the main concerns with the majority of headphones that you'll wear is that propensity for them to dig, where the 600s just don't, and that's one of the reasons why they are my top choice as far as comfort is concerned, along with like a Bayer and yeah, can't think of any other headphones. So let's get into the sound and the sound imaging and Soundstage now. So this is an interesting comparison in that there's a stark contrast between these two. First off, right away you'll notice that the bass is a lot leaner on a 702, a lot lighter, a lot more textured, whereas the 600 is rolled off, but it has more impact to it, a little bit more. You'll notice the bass more so on a 600 than you would with a 702. Definitely more roll off in a 702, not really much mid-bass presence there. It's just kind of, Metal 571 described the 600 a while back as giving you a blank stare, and that's totally true, but I would say that the 702s give you an even blanker stare. They tend to just exist. I mean, the sound signature is what it is. It's sort of very, very flat across the board. There's a little bit of emphasis in the around 1K and I believe 3, but it's a slight rise or a bump. It's not like in your face like the mids on the 600 are definitely more lively, more intense, more push forward to the point where they sort of demand you to notice them, and they sort of revel in the fact that they are indeed too much at times. So that's definitely a consensus. Some people will argue with you about it tooth and nail, but it's the truth. I mean,
I want the truth!
the 600s do have mid-range, some slight mid-range issues, and you can imagine that given that I've had these headphones since 2016, it can't be that big of a deal, but it is something to keep in mind. The 702's mid-range is definitely more neutral, I would say. It's flatter across the board, but it's not dull sounding. So like instruments and vocals do stand out, but not in a way that is overbearing, overpowering, or out of line. So yeah, as far as treble is concerned, I think the treble on both of these actually sounds fairly similar, but because the 702's bass rolls off more, I think it gives the impression or illusion that the treble is a little bit crisper and more forward, but it's not ever bitey or sibilant. It's almost like just the right amount. Maybe perhaps it could use a little bit more sparkle, but it doesn't sound dull. It just sounds almost just right, which is very hard for headphones to achieve good treble. It's either going to be a little bit too relaxed or a little bit too forward and peaky like a 4XX. But I find that in comparing the 4XX or the 400 series, well, the 4XX and the 400i to the 702's treble, definitely the 702's is more subdued and really does hit that sweet spot, whereas the 4XX and the 400i are just a little bit too sharp. With the 600's treble, it's going to sound a little bit more relaxed and laid back than the 702's, and I think that in large part does have to do with the fact that the 600's bass is a little bit less rolled off than the 702's. There's going to be a little bit more impact and weight to the bass, a warmer tilt to the 600's overall versus the 702's. The overall sound of the 702's is a lot more airy, a lot more crisp, lots of air around the instruments, very kind of almost bordering on sterile, but maybe not quite that, but getting there. A Soundstage, that's another main difference between these two, is imaging and Soundstage. Now in the 600's, instrument separation is extremely good. It's just that it has a much narrower image than that of the 702. The 702 is, as far as Soundstage, is one of the best headphones that you can buy in this price range, or otherwise. It's very, very wide open. Some people have claimed that 12 o'clock image sometimes goes missing. That is true, but I would say that's the exception and not the rule. With the 600, it's just a very narrow soundscape. You're not going to ever really feel like there's anything going on outside of you. Sometimes you will, but definitely not as much as a 702. Now in my Hi-Fi Man video, I'll link you guys to, I mentioned 600s have about average soundstage. Headphones like the Hi-Fi Man 400 series are above average, and the 702s improve upon that in the fact that they're excellent in terms of soundstage. You'll start to hear things really wide, so to your right and left, but really far out. I'm talking like I was starting to hear things down on the first floor in watching movies where I thought that someone was walking on the gravel, but when I rewinded the movie, I think it was Primal Fear, it ended up coming from the movie. So those are the types of things that you're going to start to notice. You'll feel like knocks and things like that are coming from the outside, to where you might go and answer your door when there's nobody there, stuff like that. There's also very good height and depth to the image, where you'll feel like things are happening above you and below you. But with the 600s, that's just not the case, and you're never really going to feel like that. Sometimes they do provide a pretty good soundstage, but I think that has more to do with the track itself and not the headphones. So now, don't get me wrong, the HD600s definitely have great instrument separation, but their image is just very closed in. So yeah, we need an amp for these two headphones. Definitely yes. The 702s come in at 91 decibel sensitivity, but do have a fairly low-ish impedance at 62 ohms, so they won't resist power much, but they do require more power from an amp to reach an acceptable level. These 600s are 300 ohm and 97 decibel sensitivity, but neither of these headphones is very hard to drive. I've been able to run both with even an E10K or a K3, Dragonfly Red. Anything really is going to work. You're not ever going to be lacking for power with whatever amp you choose. Yeah, it's a really good combo. The Dragonfly Red with the Ocean and the 702s. 600s also sound really good out of the Ocean, but I listened to both of these with an array of different amps, and listened to both with a lot of different albums and original soundtracks. The K702s I've been watching a lot of Netflix with lately with the K5 Pro. So just a lot of different combinations you could go with here. As far as genre is concerned, that's another one of the main differences between these headphones. K702 is going to work better for quieter passages like acoustic, folk, jazz, definitely jazz, a little bit of classical. And while it does work for hip hop and rock, you're not gonna want to push this headphone because it's not going to respond well at all. It definitely fares better for quieter stuff. It's very sort of like a really delicate sound, similar to a 400 series. Now, I do think a planar, like I mentioned in my Hi-Fi Man video, the planars do tend to portray music a little bit better, a little bit more natural, a little bit better timbre and resolution. 702 is not far behind, but it does. You're not gonna want to, listen to these at really loud volumes because it's not gonna sound. It's not like a rock out, jam out type of headphone. Whereas I would definitely recommend the 600s for that type of thing, like rock, more so for rock and hip hop. Whereas and harder stuff. Whereas the 702s just simply won't work as well. They're just a little bit too lean for those types of genres. I mean, they sound pretty decent with hip hop, but a lot of people will put these on and not be satisfied at all with those. But the 600s won't work as well for jazz or classical or those other types of quieter genres. It does work really well, but I think the 702s perform better. As I mentioned in another video, probably the Hi-Fi Man video, the jazz is very, very difficult to reproduce accurately. And I think out of everything I've heard, the 702s do it best. You really get a sense of how those delicate light drum hits sound. They just come across as really, really more realistic and better represented, or better, they're portrayed better with a 702, whereas the 600s, the sound of those types of genres like jazz and classical get too boxed in, and they end up just not sounding as good. I think the reason that the 702s do so well for jazz is because they portray the drums a lot better, and jazz is sort of a lighter genre. You don't really want to listen to it too loud as well. It just, these do a lot, the 702s do a lot better also because the soundstage on them is better. And so with jazz, a lot of time instruments are panned farther out and there's more spacing in between and more air, and I think the 702s just do a tremendous job with that. So yeah, I'll leave links down below for both of these. Which of them you go with really just depends on preference and I think in large part genre, as well as soundstage. And if you plan on listening to lighter genres, also plan on gaming a lot more and watching movies, definitely the 702 is what you want to go with. If you just want to listen to mostly music and prefer harder genres like rock, some EDM, some hip hop, some indie pop, some just any type of rock music, I think the 600s work better for a wider variety of genres than the 702s. I would never recommend a 600 for gaming or watching movies. So just keep that in mind before you decide. And yeah, that's about it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this review. Leave me some love down in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. If you like what I do here and you want to support the channel, hit that Patreon link down below. And last but not least, don't forget to ask me about my grandchildren, yeah? Yeah. Check. Review brought to you by Stu. Here's the coda. I'm nasty on the mic. Call me warm soda. Chopped up this beat real fine like cold produce. Steady in my veggies so I can focus on my David Copperfield. Y'all hocus pocus. A little loopy when I wrote this. Esoteric dopeness. Cultivating the will of a soldier. Fighting through the pain like Dooku. I told ya, sold you on my style. Snapping on cats like Private Pile. I get semi-wild every once in a while. 911 on the dial. Alone at the top with no rival. Dark is my world without a Bible. Without God's love there's no survival. So my mindset is tribal. Yeah, my mindset is tribal. Yeah, my mindset is tribal. Hey guys, Do It Y'all here, HomeStudioBasic.com, helping you make sound decisions. So today we're going to get into Sennheiser HD600. Today we're going to get into the AKG. Today we're going to get into the AKG K702 versus Sennheiser HD600. So